Joining me right now is Louisiana Congressman and House Minority Whip Steve Scalise. And Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Maria, good morning. Great to be here with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk trade first, China, and then USMCA. Do you think we're going to be able to put the right enforcement mechanism in place for China to keep its promises that it won't steal IP going forward? Are you expecting a trade deal?
Well, clearly, in the enforcement side of the China agreement's the biggest holdup because China has historically cheated on a lot of these agreements, and like you know, they steal IP, they dump. So making sure that you can enforce whatever agreement in place is going to be critical. The Trump administration has been working on that. I know Ambassador Lighthizer, I met with him recently as we were moving through our USMCA working group. We have a whip team for USMCA to try to get that passed and how important that is. But China obviously comes up a lot when we have our working groups because ultimately, we would like to see all our focus shift to, once we get USMCA in place, to holding China accountable and getting better relationships there.
What can you tell us about the USMCA deal and whether or not that does get ratified? Because a lot of times I've had Democrats on, and I don't know if it's part resistance or part there are real issues with it, but they say, I'm not going to vote for this in its current form. Do you think this passes?
I think ultimately it'll pass because there's a lot in it for everybody. If you believe in getting a better deal for America, United States, especially as it relates to Mexico and Canada, it's a better deal for American workers. It's a better deal for American jobs. So ultimately, I think it's something that ought to pass. Ultimately, the president right now is negotiating with the Democrats in the House to get a plan for how they're going to move forward with it. They're talking about some of these issues where I think in the end they're going to come to some agreement because it makes sense for everybody to get this passed so that we have a better NAFTA, 2.0 USMCA, something better for the United States than what we currently have.
The last time I asked the president about it a couple of weeks ago when I interviewed him, I said, what's plan B? Just in case this is not ratified, he said we go back to pre-NAFTA.
Yeah, and he's been clear. A lot of people thought he would pull out of NAFTA,
yeah.
Maria, and so the fact that he instead went and started negotiating and actually got an agreement with Mexico was a very positive sign. Canada was a little bit more reluctant because they had a much better deal. They closed a lot of markets off to American products that we open up in this new agreement. So it's better for the United States. I would hope that everybody would see that, but I understand trade deals are complicated,
yeah.
and some people just don't want to get there. But I think if we get the floor schedule, we'll actually be able to get the votes to get it passed.
We would see a hit to the economy, I would imagine. Things are going real well, certainly because of deregulation, because of you and your colleagues' legislation on tax reform. The president did executive orders on pipelines just yesterday.
Yeah, that was a really big deal. If you look in the Northeast especially, we're producing so much energy in America now that we're exporting. We could be one of the world's leading exporters, but yet there's some parts of the United States, especially in the Northeast, here in New York, New England states, that are cut off because they don't have access to pipelines. And in many cases, it's some of these radical environmentalist groups taking advantage of loopholes in the way that some of the old rules were written to block the building of pipelines. And what President Trump did yesterday was take an important step to say, you're not going to be able to take advantage of loopholes to block pipelines being built. If there's a legitimate reason they shouldn't be built, or maybe there's a better route, let's go look at that. But you're not just going to be able to say you can't build a pipeline through New York and cut off New England. And so that's going to be a great advancement for American energy so that we can not only export to the world, but we can actually heat our homes for a lower cost.
Yeah.
What's really important for this is it lowers rates. It helps ratepayers by taking this action that President Trump did yesterday.
And I know the president is proud to be able to say the U.S. is now the biggest producer.
Energy dominant.
Energy
Maria.
dominant. All right, let me turn to some of the news of the day in the judicial front. Former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, you along with fellow Congressman Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan are pushing for Cohen to be indicted for lying to Congress. Now, Jim Jordan joined me on Sunday Morning Futures over on Fox News back in February. Before that hearing, here's what he said.
Our staff met with his lawyer, Lanny Davis. Mr. Davis told our attorneys on the committee that Mr. Cohen couldn't talk about any of the investigations. Think about that. If you can't talk about any of the investigations, what are we going to ask him? So I think it was all designed and still is all designed to come in and have Mr. Cohen say bad things about the president. I don't know that that's something that a congressional committee should be doing.
I believe Devin Nunes, with his 8 criminal referrals that he's sending to William Barr this week, I heard that one of them was for Michael Cohen. We don't know that. Devin Nunes has not confirmed that. Tell us your thoughts. Is it just because he lied to Congress?
Well, the fact that the Democrats brought as their first star witness to Congress a person who was already pled guilty for lying to Congress, and then in that testimony, he lied to Congress yet again, and multiple times, Maria, multiple times before Jim Jordan's committee. Elijah Cummings is the chair of the committee. He said he would be the first to hold Cohen accountable if he lied to Congress, and yet Chairman Cummings hasn't done that. And so that's why our whole leadership team yesterday held a press conference to say we're filing, moving forward with legislation to actually have this referred to the Justice Department, because if you lie to Congress, he should be held accountable for doing that. Even if he had already lied to Congress before, he should be hit again for doing it. They've got to stand up for the integrity of the institution, and the fact that Chairman Cummings hasn't done this yet, he ought to step up. He should be the most outraged. He invited Cohen to be his star witness, and Cohen came and lied to Congress yet again.
Well, lying to Congress, misusing government agencies to spy in a political campaign, misleading the FISA court. These are all issues front and center now. And yesterday, Attorney General William Barr told lawmakers that the counterintelligence operation against Donald Trump after months of investigation included spying. Here's what he said.
I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Well, let me...
But the question is whether it was adequately predicated. And I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I'd need to explore that. I think it's my obligation.
They got the information from Bruce Orr. Did they disclose this to the FBI? Because remember, let me make the major point. None of this was disclosed to the FISA court when they went and spied on the Trump campaign using these very sophisticated tools that we have in our arsenal that are supposed to target terrorists and other bad guys. They use to target a political campaign operative.
Remember, Maria, how bad it was when we all found out there was this unverified dossier that was used as a basis to gain a warrant to surveil someone associated with the Trump campaign, Carter Page. And it got worse when we found out that that dossier was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC.
So this is all coming out now, Congressman. We've been covering this for 2 years, and we know what went on. But the Democrats are acting stunned. Nancy Pelosi said, I'm dismayed. I'm disappointed that the Attorney General is in Trump's pocket, basically, is what she's saying. They are ripping the AG. Your response?
Well, I've read some of the classified briefings, not all that Devin Nunes and his committee have read, but I've shared some of the same concerns that they've had, that this has been a one-sided investigation. Look, all the things that happened under the last administration when there was Russian meddling in the elections, it happened when Barack Obama was president. The spying, the other things that were alleged, frankly, the abuse of the FISA court and the problems within the FBI have not yet been rooted out. That's the main concern, because I want to see the FBI have its full integrity restored, and they've still got some cleaning of house to do.
Well, what really is extraordinary to me is that it wasn't just a couple of people at the top of the FBI and the DOJ. You had the dossier and snippets of information going through the CIA, through the NSA.
And this was with people who had we've exposed the political agenda. They weren't just showing up at the FBI, at the CIA, to do their job to protect our country. They had a political agenda, and everybody can have political beliefs. But when you show up at a job like that, if you don't want Donald Trump to get elected, that can't be what you do on your job. You can do that on your personal time. They were using their positions in those high-ranking security positions to try to undermine one of the political campaigns that they disagreed with. There's no place for that, and that needs to be rooted out.
And then they also tried to take down a duly elected president, because this all went on. It continued after he was president.
Which should be a concern for everybody. No president, Republican or Democrat, should have that happen to him in the future. President Trump said this. Nobody should have to go through what he went through. It shouldn't be allowed to stand. And the people that are still there, they've got to be rooted out.
I totally agree, and that's why I've been so outraged by it over the last 2 years, because every American should be upset by this. That that the agencies within our government that we're supposed to trust so much, FBI, DOJ, were politicized. So how far up the chain in the Obama administration did this go?
I don't know, and that's where it needs to be investigated. And look, I'm sure there were people at the FBI when Barack Obama was elected who didn't vote for him, but they didn't use their position at the FBI to try to undermine him. And if they did, I'd be the first person saying they ought to be prosecuted by justice. But there were people, and still are people at the FBI, who didn't want Donald Trump to be elected, but used their position at the FBI to try to undermine his election and post to try to undermine his presidency. There's no place for that. It's got to be rooted out.
So once again, though, the media is driving the bus on that. All over CNN, they're sort of muddying the waters again, basically saying that this is just stunning that the AG said this.
Yeah, there's gambling at Casablanca. I mean, really. They knew this was going on. They tried to cover it up. They said there would be collusion. They promised there would be collusion with Russia, and there was none.
Yeah.
And so where do they go now?
The attempted coup that failed.
Yeah.
Congressman, it's good to have you on the program.
Great to be back.
Thanks so much. Congressman Steve Scalise there.